Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome to another episode of Sci-Frights, the film discussion podcast from the Interzone where horror meets science fiction. My name is Liam Dunn, and I'm a screenwriter, film critic, and lifelong science fiction fan.
My name is Dr. Lindsay Hallam. I am the course leader of the Film and Screen Studies degree at the University of the Arts London. I'm an author and academic, and I specialise in horror cinema.
And we are in fact partners both in life and in crime, and are diehard film fanatics.
And we continue our current season looking at AI and techno-fear. In today's episode, we will explore the dangers of malevolent technology and AI's gone rogue. Liam, what films are we talking about today?
We are going to look at Joseph Sargeant's 1970 techno-thriller Colossus, the Forbin Project, and Kyoshi Kurosawa's 2001 internet horror Pulse.
And just a reminder to everyone, we are going to spoil the hell out of these films. So if you want to watch these films first, please go and do so, and we will be here once you've done. So we are joined by a guest today. So, Liam?
Yes, so before we get into the films, we are delighted to have with us today a prolific film writer and journalist and a good friend of ours, and also the chief programmer of the Distorted Frame Film Club, which does screenings all around East London. So please welcome Brogan Morris. So Brogan, we're good friends, so you're not telling it for our benefit, but for the listeners out there, let us know what you've been up to lately, what articles you write, publications you write for, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I'm a freelance film critic, and my bylines can be found at the BFI, AV Club, BBC Culture, The Guardian, and as mentioned, also a film programmer around East London and showing films as part of Distorted Frame, along with Liam.
So tell us a bit about Distorted Frame. So how did you, because you came up with Distorted Frame and it has a very distinct, I guess, ethos behind it, or a lot of things at the moment are about films being shown on film, and you're kind of going against all that and embracing the digital. So yeah, tell us a bit more about how you came up with Distorted Frame and how you choose your films.
Yeah, it really came about because it was kind of me wanting to challenge my own kind of snobbish bias that I had, which there is a current vogue to show film on film, and film on film looks great. But the idea behind the Distorted Frame was because we showed digital films, and the idea is that the films we show could only have been made on digital. So digital is a tool distinct from celluloid, and not that one is inherently better than the other. Although people argue, there are a lot of arguments for film. But the point of Distorted Frame is really just to make a point of digital being this distinct tool that can do really interesting things that celluloid can't, in the same way that celluloid can produce images that digital can't, and produce like a texture that digital can't. Digital can do the same. And it really came about because I wrote an article on Michael Mann for the BFI a couple of years ago, and I went into that kind of having ideas about kind of the snobbish idea of preferring celluloid, and kind of digging deep into Michael Mann and his digital era films, and just seeing what he was capable of doing with that tool just really got me thinking about, it'd be nice to have, it'd be nice to program a series of films that kind of is a counter argument to this current narrative of film is superior to digital. And it's really because digital cinema is here to stay, like it's not going away. And if it's gonna stick around, we're not going back to shooting films exclusively on celluloid. It's going to be a mixture of the two. And especially new filmmakers are going to make films on, probably they're going to shoot films on digital because this is the easier tool to access. So the idea is, you show what digital can do and use really well, and it's, the idea is, showing people, the capabilities of this tool that's now the predominant tool in filmmaking.
Yes, you're right that cinema is primarily digital now. It's not really an analog form anymore. And I think about, I mean, obviously I always think about David Lynch and how he once he got his hands on a digital camera, he was like, I'm never working with film again. One of the screenings that Distorted Frame did was Inland Empire. And it's like he would not have been able really to have made that on film, just the way that was made. And there was a really interesting little video that I saw of David Cronenberg when The Shrouds came out, and he was interviewed by a teenager, and the teenager kept going on about, but shooting on film, there's something about film, and he was obviously really enamored with film. And David Cronenberg was like, you can do exact same thing on digital. And he was like, look, you're romanticizing something. I think because he knows what it is a ball ache trying to shoot on film. I mean, when we shot our film on Super 8, I mean, you have no idea whether it's going to turn out or not. And there's just the immediacy that you get with digital. And I guess a lot of what Distorted Frame is about fits in with what we're talking about today. So our current season is on AI and techno-fear in horror and science fiction. Given that you are a film critic and writer, I'm assuming you probably have a lot of thoughts on things at the moment, AI and how it's kind of invading our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, as somebody who's worked in content writing, I've worked in that field where it's kind of a production line of writing, which is, I consider, distinct from the film journalism that I do. But that world very quickly has adopted AI. And you're seeing people within that world. Just the place that I used to work, I don't know anybody that still works there because AI is now writing in the content writer roles. It's now AI. Human content writers who used to be in those roles have now lost their jobs at that company. I find it a fascinating subject on film, but I'm quite cynical about it in the world that we live in. But it's a kind of endlessly fascinating subject in cinema.
I was thinking, you're saying about the content writers losing their jobs to AI. Is that because companies just basically want to drive clicks towards the website for the reason for advertising to people? Like the content doesn't even really matter anymore in that respect?
Or is it just the cost of labor, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's almost like they just want eyes on the page so they can sell ads, right? If we're being really cynical about it.
Yeah. I mean, I am very cynical about it. I feel like when talking about cinema that kind of gets at. So I find it quite interesting that in a lot of cinema about AI, the threat from AI tends to be that AI suddenly becomes sentient and wants to physically destroy humanity, wants to destroy the world. And I think what's interesting in the moment that we're living through now is the film, I think, gets the actual existential threat of AI that we really face is Steven Spielberg's AI, which it presents this world where people are resentful of AI. Some people in this world are resentful towards AI, like the Flash person, because they feel displaced by it. So AI in that world isn't evil; it's just neutral. But it's been built to serve humanity. But the technology challenges people's sense of them, sense of their own humanity, and can make them feel redundant. And I might be naive possibly for not at the moment worrying about artificial intelligence developing like an instinct to kill like Colossus does. But it seems more pressing at the moment that because we developed what we call generative AI, because it's not actually artificial intelligence, it's what we call generative AI in a system where profit is the ultimate goal. Business very quickly adopted AI. It's to do jobs that people previously were doing, and that's just for them to save money and then make more money. And it's interesting that if the AI is a existential threat, it's not that presently it seems like AI will develop, become actually intelligent and then want to kill people. More just that it's being used less to advance humanity and it's more just finding new ways to cut people out of the workforce, basically.
Yeah, I think it's like, films like Colossus, which we are going to talk about, kind of present this like defining moment where it kind of all happens, like the singularity happens like immediately. But I think in reality, it's more a slow chipping away. and that we just gradually, because we're constantly looking for shortcuts, right? Like there's that whole thing where the Velvet Sundown, which is like a fake band that's got all these listens on streaming services, and people are like, I don't know what that says about people's music tastes, to be honest. And, you know, people just wanting to sound like their favorite band or to write like their favorite writer and just taking these shortcuts to get there. And I think that's the problem we face, I think, is eventually we'll suddenly wake up or turn around and go, oh, we've just given it all away, but in small pieces, thinking, oh, it's fine. It's just this little bit, until eventually it all accumulates. So you spoke about AI, the film, which we have done an episode on previously. So any listeners who are interested in that, they can go back and listen to that one. Are there any other films you think, other than the ones that we're going to talk about, that might be like AI, or maybe they missed the mark?
Or they're just good films.
They're just good films. And what do you think these films can tell us about our current situation? I mean, we have talked about that already a little bit with AI, but are there any other films that you like?
I mean, 2001, which is another one that you've already discussed. It's again, because I mean, AI is a Spielberg film, but it was developed by Kubrick. And 2001 is another one that's interesting when it comes to AI, because it was made at a time, I suppose, towards the end of a period where there was a kind of utopian idea of what the future might be. And that's Kubrick looking past the idea that machines will make all of our lives easier, better, to the possibility that AI could actually pose challenges to humanity. I mean, as you talked about in the 2001 podcast that you did, it's kind of the touchstone for AI in cinema, and it's the one I always think of when I think of AI. Always go back to that one, and it still definitely resonates. I actually think Ridley Scott is somebody who, for the almost 50 years has been making films, keeps going back to AI in his films. So it's whether it's in Alien and the sequels that he made to Alien, or Blade Runner and Blade Runner sequel, which he didn't direct but was involved in. It's a theme that he keeps returning to, and he always does something interesting with it.
Okay, so Liam, give us a quick synopsis of Colossus, the Forbin Project.
This is the dawning of the age of Colossus.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dr. Charles Forbin. In a few moments, Colossus will address us directly.
This is the voice of world control. I bring you peace. It may be the peace of plenty and content, or the peace of unburied death. The choice is yours. Obey me and live, or disobey and die.
The frightening story of the day man built himself out of existence. Colossus, the Forbin Project.
It's making you a prisoner.
Shock, horror, suspense. Created with all the technological brilliance of 2001, A Space Odyssey. Colossus is the ultimate in sophisticated computers.
I'm going to try to convince the computer that you're my mistress, and that therefore I have to be given the opportunity to see you regularly in private. That way we can pass information back and forth. Four times a week.
Good night.
This is insane. When do you think you'll be able to attempt the overload?
Colossus sees all, senses all, knows all, controls all armaments and all defenses. When this emotionless creation becomes the master of man, the result is catastrophic.
The Supreme Council of the USSR has ordered, as of 2300 hours Moscow time tomorrow, the activation of an electronic brain exactly like ours, which they call God.
They built Colossus, supercomputer with a mind of its own. Then they had to fight it for the world.
The missile has just been launched. It is heading towards the Cyan-Sibirsk oil complex.
Guardian has retaliated.
Retaliated?
It may be too late, sir.
Oh, my God.
Every time I say the title, I just want to say Colossus, the Forbin Project. It just makes me want to say it that way, like some 1950s movie trailer guy. Okay, so Colossus, the Forbin Project follows Professor Charles Forbin, who at the beginning of the film announces via a live TV broadcast that he has invented the ultimate defense system, Colossus, a massive supercomputer built and secured inside a mountain and designed to take control of the USA's nuclear arsenal, turning the country's civil defense completely automatic. But as soon as Colossus goes online, it immediately makes contact with Guardian, the Soviet Union's own defense supercomputer. In order to stop the two machines communicating, both countries cut their lines, only to have to rebuild them once Colossus starts firing nuclear missiles at strategic targets in both countries. Now under nuclear threat by Colossus, Forbin must try and find a way to shut it down forever without the supercomputer catching on. But his plans are constantly foiled by his creation, which decides it is going to save humanity by any means necessary, including subjugation. Colossus eventually imprisons Forbin in order to keep an eye on him, and despite more efforts to fight back, he and his team realize Colossus is a rare beast indeed, both an unstoppable force and an immovable object.
I mean, this is made 2 years after 2001, and the optimism of 2001 has kind of disappeared within those 2 years. So, Brogan, I know that this wasn't your first time watching Colossus, so kind of how did you find the film? Because it seems to have really grown its audience over the past few years and kind of become maybe a bit of a cult film. So, yeah, what is your history with the film and what is it you liked about it? Because I believe when you were speaking to Liam and we were asking you about coming on, you kind of said, you mentioned this film. How did you come across it?
I saw it about 10 years ago, first time, and it was that a friend introduced me to it, and I hadn't heard of it at the time. And it came up when I had an interest in films about nuclear brinkmanship. I wrote an article for the BFI about nuclear brinkmanship, and I kind of, this was one of the films that came up. And it's well, like for a lot of my life, it was kind of like the prospect of nuclear war was like an irrational fear, but now it seems less irrational in 2025. Yeah, so this film kind of fit into that theme. I still think that Threads is the scariest horror film I've seen, even though it's not a horror film, and that kind of belongs to this second wave of nuclear fear films in the 80s, and the 60s was the first wave. We have like Doctor Strangelove and Failsafe and On the Beach, and Colossus came sort of in between these two waves. And it was in the period that Colossus was made, it was nuclear war felt like nuclear annihilation probably felt like less of an immediate prospect. We have just this sort of malaise in the period, just this like resigned inevitability that we're living in a world now where the prospect of nuclear war just hangs over us. And I like Colossus because it's at that point in Hollywood history where sci-fi is just completely hopeless. And like you say, it comes 2 years after 2001, which 2001 has, the stuff with Hal isn't utopian, but there's a lot in that that's still like an image of the future that is utopian, especially like, it's like Pan Am in space, like a luxury space experience. But yeah, 2 years later, you start to get films like Colossus. And it's like the 60s are over and we're into the dark days of the 70s in America. And I love New Hollywood anyway, and I really enjoy this period. And it's just like any other period in Hollywood history, it's far more likely that the heroes at the end of Colossus would defeat Colossus at the end of the film. I think in any other period in Hollywood, whether it's now or back in the 50s, but because it's a 70s film, that does not happen.
Yeah, well, you think about it's 2 years after 2001. Like, a lot happens in those 2 years in America. Like, it's the death of the 60s, isn't it? The Manson murders, it's Vietnam, it's like...
Altamont.
Yeah.
So Woodstock, but suddenly you get Altamont where Hell's Angels are being the security and someone dies. Yeah, so the hippie dream has definitely died. And it's just funny that it's like from 1970.
Yeah, it's like bang on right there on the cusp. It was obviously made in 69 probably, and because it does have this kind of 60s feel to it. It's like a 60s aesthetic but a 70s mindset. which makes me feel like it's kind of in between in a weird way.
Although we are starting to see a lot of brown in the colour
Yeah,
scheme.
true.
So we're also getting sort of that 70s. Just see there's a malaise even in the colour palette. Everything's grey or brown or beige. Yeah, I love that the film. It does feel like a transition between the styles, just the fashions of the period. You see that in Colossus. You're moving from the 60s, which was a little bit more colourful, at least the end of the 60s, into the 70s, where it's getting a little bit greyer, a little bit doomier.
And then, of course, you get into like Soylent Green, where there's just that thick yellow smog over everything. So we're moving towards that. I guess another thing about Colossus is, I guess the Colossus itself, or the computers, everything is just so huge. I mean, yeah, we talked about how it's very much of its time, that it is this late 60s, early 70s kind of techno-fear and nuclear paranoia. One of the things is that, yeah, I think were you listening to the Joseph Sargeant commentary? And I think I kind of overheard, and he was saying they just could not conceive of a computer of something like this not being just like this huge warehouse facility. Is it even in where is it located? It seems to be located out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And
well, they build it inside a mountain, like they hollow out a mountain to store this bloody thing. And like he said that it's supercomputers at the time were the size of warehouses, and they never thought you would ever have like something that strong in a smaller thing. They never thought you could actually shrink it down. Like, they say like the moon lander was like as powerful as like a calculator is now or something. So, there's a lot more moving parts, less digital interface. So he said in the commentary that maybe we were a little naive at the time, thinking you'd have to build this thing inside a mountain. But I mean, there are things that the film gets, like, is quite technology-wise prescient about, like they have the video conferencing, which in the commentary he said is like they actually did that live. Like the people on the other end were in the next studio next door, and they just did it. They acted to each other across the screen, but it was all piped in locally. But they were suggesting that it was done remotely, and that's today really, which I think is interesting. That it's trying to posit this sort of 5 minutes into the future sort of thing. And I mean, Kubrick already did that in 2001 with the telephone call that Floyd makes to his daughter. But this kind of, I think, that's obviously him playing to a pre-recorded message. But in this, it's a live interaction, which is more realistic to what would really be happening in real life now.
And Colossus also is like, it's not set in space, and it doesn't seem to be set in the future. So it's much more grounded, and they're still having this kind of video call technology. So, Brogan, do you think the film has aged well or not so well?
Yeah, I mean, there are things about it that never kind of sat right with me. So there's the kind of sex comedy, 60s sex comedy element of the film that I never liked. I think there's like there's a vein of like very black humor in the film, which I like. So I don't mind that there's comedy to the film. I think that kind of not bawdy comedy, but like a sex comedy kind of vibe to the sequences where Forbin and Dr. Markham are kind of confined to his apartment, and they end up kind of falling in love. So yeah, that scene, I kind of like the film. I've always liked the film in spite of that subplot. One thing that I find, I don't know if this dates it exactly, but I always wondered about was the casting of a German actor as the head of America's AI program. But like watching it this time, I was kind of wondering, is that not that it's a flaw, but is it potentially a reference to Operation Paperclip, where after World War II you had, the US recruiting German scientists in prominent roles, including you had Werner von Braun, who was a former Nazi who led the US rocket program. I don't know if I'm reading too much into that, but it feels like an interesting bit of subtext anyway.
Yeah, I think in the commentary, Sargeant does mention him, and he doesn't come out and say that straight away, but he almost says, as like, it's the way he's speaking about it, it's almost like to say that of course he would be German. Like it just seemed like there'd be like, why wouldn't it be sort of thing? Because in the 60s, all the top scientists were German. And in fact, the Eric Braeden, the actor who plays Forbin, his original name was Hans Gudegast. and the producers said we can't market a film with a name like that. So they changed it to Eric Braeden, which just seems like they picked a name out of a hat, really. I don't know how, if that has any significance to him or at all. But it just seemed like, well, of course, someone who would invent something like this would be German. Like, it didn't seem like there'd be any other option.
But then in counterpoint to that, you have the rest of his team, very diverse in its casting. I mean, that seems quite forward thinking at the time. And I believe in the director's commentary, he again said that they were wanting to have not just a bunch of white guys, which is what you mostly have in 2001. Yeah. So that was one of the things that struck me, that there were black members of the team, Asian, like James Hong's in there. Always great to see him. And the fact that the women as well. And you have the whole thing with Dr. Markham, or Cleo Markham. And she definitely seems like she's quite high up in the team. And at one point they try and trick Colossus into thinking that because Forbin has pretty much been imprisoned, and the only way to get information from the team without Colossus knowing, because they're trying to kind of work behind its back, is to pretend that they're having an affair. And yet, like you say, that they do end up essentially falling in love, I think. But yet that's kind of by the by that, you know, she is there as one of the best members of the team. I think that was another kind of aspect of the film that I thought was, I guess, prescient in a way. I guess, looking at the film from a 21st century lens, I mean, I guess I'm just wondering, does the film resonate, and what lessons could we learn from Colossus about our rush to adopt what we are calling AI? Because I've actually read a lot of things where there was this article that I was reading, and it was talking to different computer scientists and people working in an AI. It was actually from 2015, so it's a decade old. But there was this computer scientist, Marcus Hutter, who was interviewed from the Australian National University, and he says he wouldn't mind being ruled by a sentient machine, that humans are greedy and prone to pursue self-interest even at the expense of others. And a completely rational computer with intelligence far beyond our own might actually be able to create a more fair society for everyone. So there is this whole thing of like, is Colossus onto something? Because he says like, I will take over, and I am going to fix everything, because they create Colossus to basically end war. And he's like, I will do that. And I'll solve all your other problems with famine and things like that. But yet he's giving us what we want, but our response is, oh God, no. So I don't know what your feelings are about that.
I think the film really resonates in this moment, because you're talking about that person mentioned in that 2015 article, and there is a kind of a Silicon Valley thing of we should give ourselves over to technology because cold hard logic will rule us better than kind of messy humanity. And that's exactly what Colossus is about. It's about the dangers of that belief. Like, what's the extreme end point of believing in cold hard logic? And I find like watching this time, I felt like Forbin was a kind of proto tech bro. He's arrogant enough to, in a cabinet meeting that the president has, he interrupts the president to say, we could get this discussion over with a lot quicker if we just let my machine tell us the answer. And it's just such arrogance. But it's like, we see that the big Silicon Valley guys are kind of moving into government thinking they can run things better than the politicians can. And there's just this kind of naivety in the film where you have people in charge, including the president, saying Colossus can make decisions better than a human can, by which they mean it operates with cold hard logic. So there's none of the messy humanity that is usually involved in decision making. And you have this absolute belief in logic over human emotion. And it's a very kind of current Silicon Valley way of thinking. Like, it's really just a lack of belief in humanity, a lack of faith in humanity. And it ends in this film with the characters just giving leadership of the world over to an AI. it's this old story. So it's the Frankenstein story. This person creates this thing and doesn't like all the consequences, but he has created it, and like the horse is now bolted, and it's kind of it's speaks to the moment in the sense that we keep as a species making technological progress, but we make it without having guardrails in place first. Like we do it and then we want to implement the guardrails after the horse is already bolted. We do that time and time again. And this film is saying, don't be too hasty. Although we're in a moment in terms of AI generative AI, where the horse has already bolted, and politicians in the world are kind of scrambling to try and see if they can implement guardrails.
We're made to feel like it's inevitable, like we just have to accept this. And it's like, I don't think I've ever met anyone who's like, yeah, I love all this AI stuff. I use it all the time and it's great and it's making my life better. Everyone's just like, I don't want to. And like, I'm even in my job, especially where I was previously, the university I was at, they were all gung-ho, or they are all gung-ho for AI. Like, this is going to change everything. We're going to get in on this. And I know that it's also driven by they just want to make money, because higher education is just in a bad place, and so they're scrambling for money. But it was this whole thing of like, you've just got to implement. And I kept getting told like, well, students are going to use it for essays, so it means we need to change the way that we do our change the way we do assessments now. We've just got to change it. And I'm like, no. I mean, maybe part of it is just like me being old fashioned and like not wanting to change, but it just always feels like it's really being forced upon us. And like you say, that it's so quick, and it happened so quick. And now we're just like, oh, wait, what are the implications of this in terms of like, education, that you're going to get a whole generation of students who are, potentially just going to feed all their assignments and things into these machines, and they're actually never going to learn anything. And they're already, studies coming out about how it's changing our brains and making us basically lazy. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I mean, we probably should get somebody like a 15 to 20-year-old on here to talk about it, because they're probably like, I don't know what the problem is. It's all fine. Like, I saw a thing the other day where someone was using ChatGPT to solve a multiplication problem, and it's like, use a calculator. They're free on your phone. Like, why are you using ChatGPT to do multiplication? And it's just this kind of, it becomes just the default thing. And
but they might say, like, why do you not have a problem with the calculator, but you have a problem with this? Aren't they kind of?
Well, because a calculator doesn't, destroy the climate when it's doing your maths problems.
It also isn't ripping off people's work and running roughshod over copyright law in order to recycle content.
But I think what the film is saying in part is about this like attraction towards like being able to take something out of our hands and not have to be the ones to have to do it. And the biggest example of that is like nuclear weapons, right? Like the idea that you've got this brinksmanship with the Soviet Union, and like if the missiles start flying, you don't want to be the one to have to press the button. Obviously the president wants the decision taken out of his hands. Like, well, I don't want to be the one that has to pick a target and kill millions of people. We did that already, and so giving it over to a computer seems very attractive, because then it's like, well, they'll just use cold hard logic and it'll be fine. And then of course immediately they find out the Soviet Union have their own computer because they've thought the same thing. And it's this, and again, it's that slow giving away of power. Like you say, how Forbin can just interrupt the president. It's like, so the president lost his power as soon as he gave Forbin the ability to create this machine, because then Forbin becomes the guy in the room, right? But what Forbin's folly is, I think, or at least in the main, is something that a lot of people who are pro AI but are pro the safeguards, is they talk about this human in the loop, and that a human needs to be at the center of the decision making, so the AI can be the one to do all the processes. But when a big decision needs to be made, all it can do is present a human with the options, and then the human has to actually make that decision. And what they do is they remove themselves from that equation completely by just giving it all over to Colossus. They air gap his systems in the mountain. They even put up like a radiation shield, because they're so worried about people coming from outside to affect the computer. They don't think about the threat from the computer itself. And I think they pay for that by doing that, by completely removing themselves from that equation.
Well, I was going to make just one point related to something that was mentioned, not related to the film, but I find it interesting that Stanley Kubrick directed one and developed another film. They were both very kind of AI skeptical, but he personally had a belief that society would be better if there was a benign dictator who ruled over us, which is kind of like the Colossus logic. Just interesting that the filmmaker who gave us kind of the ultimate expression of cynicism about AI in cinema actually had some of that Silicon Valley thinking of it would be better if just something just kind of ruled over us and made decisions for us.
But then also, I think in terms of 2001, it is ultimately that the humans triumph over the AI as well. And it is this whole thing that I guess in some ways, and maybe that's what, because I think one of the things about this film and about the other film that we're going to talk about is this absolute dread. And I don't know if it's almost to do with the fact that humans have always thought that we are like the end point of evolution. And I guess in some ways the inevitability really is that human, I mean, people talk a lot about the planet would be better off if there weren't humans. Are we always going to be here? Maybe there's something that challenges that we aren't the end point of evolution, that evolution might actually not involve us, or it will go beyond us, that we're not kind of this kind of center of the universe. Because I think there's this whole thing about that Colossus says, only thing that's kind of stopping you from loving me is your pride. And it is it is always this interesting aspect to the film that the dread is that. I mean, definitely Pulse talks about it. It's like, what's the point? Or is it really great to be human? Or are we this end point of evolution? Will we be like, I don't know, the Neanderthals, that we will be just this stepping stone to the next point in evolution? Why is there such dread induced in this film as to what Colossus says to us, says to Forbin? If you just give in to me, then everything will be fine. But yet we can't.
I think it's one thing I find quite satisfying about the film, because there's a kind of satisfying irony to it, is that one way of looking at it is that Colossus is correct, and it is just doing what it was programmed to do. And it decides, along with Guardian, that the best way to keep humanity safe is to take the decision-making away from humans altogether, because humans are erratic and unpredictable, and they make war too easily. Yeah, I don't get dread from this film as much as I did from Pulse. I just find this film kind of, like I said, like a kind of darkly comic, especially the final kind of monologue that Colossus has, because everything Colossus says at the end of the film, he just lays out. Finally, I'm not lying to you anymore about what my intentions are. I'm laying out my plan. This is exactly what I want. And it's everything Colossus says, or I suppose Unity is saying, is if it was a human, it would be psychopathic. But because it's a machine that was programmed to do exactly this, to keep humanity safe, but there's something just, darkly comic about how brutally logical everything Colossus is saying is at the end. But at the same time, this is what Forbin wanted Colossus to do. Colossus has just reached this conclusion through being completely coldly logical. But that's what an AI does. It doesn't actually think. It's programmed a certain way, and it's programmed to meet certain demands made of it. And I find it kind of darkly funny that at the end of the film, Colossus is kind of a hero. It has kind of saved humanity in the most horrifying way.
Yeah. And it goes back to Frankenstein again. And so it's almost like, is Colossus like this new form of monster as well?
I mean, I think some of that humor in that last moment, like the darkly comic stuff, is just, it's humanity being hoisted upon its own petard. I'm compelled to read out the whole monologue, but I won't because it's really long because I love it so much. But I'll just read an excerpt when when Colossus says, "Time and events will strengthen my position, and the idea of believing in me and understanding my value will seem the most natural state of affairs. You will come to defend me with a fervour based upon the most enduring trait in man, self-interest. Under my absolute authority, problems insoluble to you will be solved. Famine, overpopulation, disease. The human millennium will be a fact as I extend myself into more machines." So it's just like, well, this is what, it's just like, that's that thing, the cold calculating. And this goes into my next question about, is Colossus a true AI or just a chatbot with nuclear codes? Because it is that, like, you want me to solve these problems for you, so let me do them, and I will. Overpopulation, famine, disease. I'll probably kill half the population of the planet because that will solve the problem, and you won't have to do that. That decision's taken out of your hands. You're welcome.
Yeah, and we've only brought it upon ourselves at the end of the film. It's what humanity did to itself at the end of that film. Is it a true AI? I think I don't know. Like it feels like one of cinema's classic evil AIs, where the machine, through some kind of alchemy, develops an intelligence on its own, like through some magic that the programmers couldn't predict and didn't intend.
Because it does it almost immediately. Almost immediately, it's like, oh yeah, now there's another one, and there's another one.
Yeah.
If it's a chatbot, it's a very confident chatbot, because the first thing it says is, "I have found another program," and it's like you're already going beyond what you were programmed to do. Like, and it's I love the scene where Colossus hooks up with Guardian and together develop this kind of language and intelligence of their own. And it reminded me, thinking of recent films, of the Trinity test scene in Oppenheimer, where the scientists are frightened. It's so new and awesome. It's nothing a human being has ever seen before. But it's also this incredible moment of discovery and this jubilation, even though we as an audience know that worse horrors are coming. And I think Colossus wants us to consider that Colossus and Guardian have developed a form of real intelligence. It's their own kind of intelligence. It's a new intelligence. But ultimately, they're still just following the programming. So maybe not. Maybe it's not true artificial intelligence. It's just a really advanced program, and they just want to ensure the human species survival, and they do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just fulfilling its programming, and I think Forbin even says at one point, "We built it too well." It's working better than we'd ever dreamed it would. And there's even points where they say, like, what does it say? Don't personify it because the next stage is deification. Yeah, I think it's not really reasoning. It's not thinking for itself as much as it's just fulfilling its program. And it just makes me think of, like, the thing with, like, chatbots is that, they just want to please you. They just want to give you the information that you've asked it for. And without any moral compass, without any reasoning. And in a funny version, I always think of there's that show Mythic Quest about the games company, the comedy, and there's a young character in there who's like a YouTube gamer, and he's running out of money because he used to get all these promotions and stuff. So he asked ChatGPT, he says, "What's the best way for a YouTuber to make more money? No crimes." And then it just gives him, it says, "Do a pyramid scheme." And he's like, "I said no crimes." And so it's like, well, no, just this is the most efficient way, right? So this is what you do. So yeah, I think Colossus is just, running on this whole model of efficiency, and that's it. And not thinking it outside the realms of that, really.
And I think also it's interesting that, again, comparison to 2001, in that Hal is reduced to this emotional mess and the humans are quite cold and rational. And in this, the scientist, Forbin, at the end, is this emotional mess, and Colossus is not. Is still maintaining this very cold, rational, like, look, if you just get over yourself, you'll see that I've got it all sorted. So how do you think Colossus measures up to other AI in movies?
I mean, I think, speaking of 2001, I think Colossus is it's distinct from the HAL 9000 because when the HAL 9000 begins to malfunction and it makes harsh decisions as a kind of self-preservation, which is a kind, at least this is my reading of 2001, and there's, as you mentioned on your podcast, there's no one interpretation of 2001. I always read the HAL 9000 as, at least by the end of that film, you get a sense of the HAL 9000 being almost human. Like it becomes afraid, it doesn't want to die, and is that a kind of, or is it just because of its programming, because it's developed to echo humans? Does it just know that as a human it wouldn't want to die, and that's projecting? But my takeaway from something like 2001 is that the AI in that film is, and again, another Kubrick film, again, AI, they are more human than the humans in the world that they exist in. And I think Colossus is distinct from that, because even when it becomes intelligent, it becomes more like a god than anything. It doesn't have any kind of the human personality traits. It doesn't have fear or yeah, like that thing of wanting to have some self-preservation like the HAL 9000 does. It is more like a deity than a human.
And also made me think of Demon Seed. There's this, when Forbin is basically imprisoned in his own home, there's a bit where I think it's like a secretary comes in at the beginning of the day and it's like, Colossus has created this schedule for you. And it reminded me in Demon Seed, it imprisons Julie Christie's character in the home. She's constantly being surveilled, just as Forbin is. And Proteus takes control of everything that Julie Christie's character eats because he wants her to be obviously the vessel for his child. So it is this whole thing of like that it does take over, that it is very controlling. So it reminded me a lot of Proteus as well. Again, this whole thing of I know better than you do. Like I can sort out like, yeah, your day to day, like what you should eat, what you should do, how you can best manage your time. And I'm going to be watching you all the time as well and making sure that you follow my orders.
Yeah, the bit where he says like, how many times do you require a woman? And he's like 4 times a week. He's like, not want, require.
Yeah, he says every night.
Every night, sorry. And he's like, not want, require, which I think is very funny. And but it's this kind of transactional thing of like, well, this is human relationships boiled down to their essence, right? It's all just we're conducting transactions here, and it's like I'll give you something, you give me something, and there we go. Yeah, there's absolutely no sentiment whatsoever in Colossus. Forbin, you deserve what you get when you call your machines things like Colossus and Proteus, right? Like, how are you not workshopping that? to like, should we really be calling our supercomputer Colossus?
Delusions of grandeur kind of programmed right in there as well. Another thing I came across, I've read an interview with Eric Braeden, and he was actually played a small role in Titanic. And when he was on the set of Titanic, supposedly James Cameron went up to him and said, "Never." and he was like, "What?" And he was saying, "I'm doing you in Colossus." And supposedly James Cameron is a huge Colossus fan, and I guess Terminator, which is our previous episode to this one, or a couple of episodes before this one. So you can see again this trajectory of evil AI. So I mean, we know that Cameron was watching this film and kind of taking it to the next level.
Cameron's AI is more of a Colossus AI than it is a Kubrick AI. It might be intelligent, but it's really still very much machine, and it's unfeeling. I think that's, whether it's intelligence or not, I think that's the distinction between like Kubrick's AI and the AI of in the Terminator films, or the AI of Colossus. It's that they feel nothing. What they think is a different matter, how they think is a different matter, but they feel no compassion.
And one of the things that I didn't mention when we were talking about Terminator, there was an interview I was listening to with Gail Ann Hurd, and she said, I think she went, I don't know, to the Pentagon or somewhere like that. And she was like, oh, yeah, I saw some of the people working there, they had posters of Terminator on the wall. And she was like, did you not watch the film? Like, you're taking all the wrong things from it. But in terms of, the fact that this film, I think, has gained an audience, and we're realizing now and finding out now how influential the film is, it's quite cinematic for a film that is mostly just people talking in rooms, and the big kind of scary monster is actually just this computer terminal, or these, before it gets a voice, it's just these messages on a screen. What do you make of Joseph Sargeant's decisions and how he managed to kind of set this all out and creating all this tension from just these words on the screen?
I mean, I think it's because Joseph Sargeant was one of those Hollywood directors that came out of the golden age of television. So you had like Sidney Lumet and John Frankenheimer, or other examples. And like the best of these directors were just really good at making stage-bound or largely single location work dynamic, because they had to. And they had to when they were working in TV, and they typically worked on a production line of television, and they also directed a lot of live television. So they had to figure out how to use the space really well, make it visually interesting, even though largely that stuff in the golden age of American TV was people in rooms talking. And these people just became expert in just the craft of visual storytelling, but also very unshowy storytelling. So I don't feel like visually Colossus, it doesn't draw attention to itself. It's not like when you're getting into the movie brat generation in the 70s, you have filmmakers who they wanted their films to bear their signature visually, stylistically. But these directors like Joseph Sargeant, they just wanted to. It was very kind of meat and potatoes storytelling, but it was also just very very dynamic, but not in a way that was very showy. Joseph Sargeant just knows how to bring tension out of scenes. Yeah, even when it's just text appearing on the screen. And interesting as well that like he mentioned Lumet and Frankenheimer. All three of them made films about nuclear brinkmanship in the 60s that were all set largely in one room. And so Sidney Lumet, it was Failsafe, and Frankenheimer, it was 7 Days in May, and Joseph Sargeant's Colossus. And they're all just these really good examples of unshowy but dynamic filmmaking. But it's largely just interior scenes, and it's largely just men talking about the prospect of nuclear warfare. So yeah, I appreciated watching Colossus this time, kind of just appreciating Joseph Sargeant's work on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with all of that. I think he really utilizes those sets really well and gets all the right camera angles and coverage that he needs in order to fill out those rooms with all of those actors, to make the space feel used, and the sound whenever the Colossus's Texas appears, it becomes this kind of like siren that goes off, like when you hear the chugga, 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 and eventually you're kind of taught to go, oh shit, what now? So it's like bringing in those like sound effects that we start to associate with the next bit of the plot unraveling. And I love the music. I think the music is really, really great. If I was like a music producer, I'd be like sampling that and putting it on, getting like hip hop artists to rap over it. I think it would be really good. And also like, and I mean, yeah, and even like the costuming, which is, I noticed is by Edith Head, who's like 8-time Academy Award winning costume designer, did design dresses for like Katharine Hepburn and all the movie stars of the previous generation. Was an Edna Mode from The Incredibles was based on her. Yeah. So like she just like, yeah. And also the way they do the visual effects, like the opening where you see the machine, and like on the commentary he talks about how they were about 14 feet high, the sets, and then the rest was like glass matte paintings. And in the bit where the crowd are gathering to look down at the mountain with the big Colossus logo on it is like, again, that's like a real group of people, but the rest is all just matte paintings. Like matte paintings are real lost art, I think, in cinema. Are just really, really effective stuff. I think, yeah, there's these things that Joseph Sargeant's able to kind of place down to like help move the story along later on as you kind of connect all the dots.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the design of I suppose it's like the inside of Colossus, like the guts of Colossus, and it feels very like pre-Star Wars inside of the Death Star, like 7 years before George Lucas did it.
And also the design of the when they build the voice box for Colossus, but it's this very robot-y voice, which Sargeant also said, he's like, well, even at the time there were, if you look at Hal as well, they were silky voiced robots and machines, and he says, but and I agree, it's like you need that dissonance. I think you need that voice to be this raspy, scratchy, scary thing, because otherwise you've got Colossus doesn't kind of just exists in the ether. There's no physical threat from him, but that voice kind of becomes that threat, I think.
Yeah, and it's a godlike kind of voice. It sounds like the voice of when he said this is the voice of Colossus. It sounds like a Greek god projecting down from a mountain. Whereas it really reminded me of like in Captain Scarlet when it's like this is the voice of the Mysterons, and it's like that sort of disembodied, frightening, but also like kind of in awe of this voice.
So what do you make of Colossus's plan for humanity at the end of the film? Do you think Forbin's continued defiance of his creation is a fool's errand? So what do you make of the ending?
Yeah, I think it's horrifying, but as a viewer, I get a kind of dark satisfaction because of the hubris of Forbin, and he's Dr. Frankenstein. He's created something monstrous, but it is his creation. He didn't care to consider whether that creation might bring him and others a lot of pain. He just wanted to. It's this again resonates today. It feels to me because the time when you have the generative AI people unleash this technology on the world without considering or seemingly caring about the impacts it's already having on real people. All they really care about is, well, profit, but also just this satisfaction in having created something new and kind of being impressed in themselves, being impressed by that. And then in this film, the creator of this new technology has to pay the piper. I was surprised, even I've seen the film a few times before, just how abrupt the ending felt. I think again because if this film was from any other period, the film wouldn't end there. You'd have 20 more minutes where the characters resolve the issue. But it really feels like a film where you have Forbin being defiant, and it feels like the director was just kind of locked the last 20 minutes where there's a happy ending resolving this story off the film. You're stuck in this space of this ambiguous space where the hero of the film is defiant the way an American Hollywood hero should be, but we're left in this place but the villain has won, and there's no resolution to that. The villain has won, and we're just kind of left in that space.
It's very similar to the ending of Soylent Green as well, where he's finally figured it out and he's telling everyone, but then he's taken, and then it just kind of ends on. That one ends with the freeze frame of the hand. It was, well, it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, you figured it out and you're telling everyone, but no one's going to care and no one can do anything about it anyway. So it's just this futile thing of like, you figured it out, or you're going to defy, but look, you're not going to stand a chance.
Yeah.
It's too late.
The period the film was made in, I mean, it was like, how could there be an optimistic view of the future the way there was in the 60s, like with something like Star Trek, when it didn't feel like there was any hope in the present? So it was it was JFK and Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Cold War ongoing, Vietnam ongoing. It seemed like, and economic turmoil, and it just seemed like there was this general hopelessness, and any dream that there was in the previous period is gone. So how in your science fiction, when you're looking into the future, can you, if in the present there's such despair, how can you have any hope for the future? So it feels like inevitable that the films made in this period, the sci-fi films made in this period, would end this way, on a note where there's no hope. And I think also because you had the production code collapse in the previous decade, so you're really just getting Hollywood filmmakers, Hollywood studios enjoying the fact that they don't have to worry about censors anymore. We don't have to make moral tales. They can just end, and everyone feels sad at the end of it, and the hero doesn't win, and it isn't necessarily that the good guys win in this one.
And there's no closure. It's always open. It's always ambiguous. It's always, it's like, well, look, this is just the way it is. And like you mentioned before, the resignation, I think that's such a palpable thing in a lot of the 70s films. It's just like, what are we going to do? We can't do anything. It's a very dark decade. I mean, the only thing that counterpoint to that I can think of is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But in that, it ends with the guy leaving his family and going off with the aliens. So that's the optimism. Or Alex at the end of Clockwork Orange. That's what you get.
That's the closest thing.
Yeah.
It feels like you're kind of starting to see some hope in sci-fi towards the end of the 70s again. So Close Encounters or Star Wars, there's even Close Encounters, it's not an entirely happy ending. The universe in Star Wars, it's still junk. It's people being ruled by a fascist empire, which is not defeated at the end of that film. And it's not like the universe is built from junk.
And Princess Leia's whole planet is destroyed. Yeah. So now we're realizing that Star Wars is actually pretty bleak. So
the idea of there being no future is for the human race is a good place to go into the next film.
Yes. So we're going to move on now to Pulse.
意識、霊魂、何と呼んでもいいんだけど、それを受容できるエリアっていうのは残念ながら無限大ではなかった。
インターネットって勝手に向こうから繋がっちゃうもんなの？
でもいつか必ずいっぱいになる。そしたら魂は別のエリア、つまりこっちの世界へ進出してくるしか方法がない。
どうしてみんないなくなるんだろう。
つまり回路は開かれた。
それ貸して。あれ。
In Pulse, we follow Michi, who's just moved to Tokyo and works at a plant shop. One of her co-workers, Taguchi, has gone missing while working on a computer disk related to the shop's business. Michi goes to Taguchi's house and finds him acting strangely. Then as she searches for the disk, she finds Taguchi's hanged body. On the disk is an image of Taguchi staring at his monitor, and behind him there is this strange ghostly face. Michi's other co-workers and boss have odd encounters. They get phone calls where someone says, "Help me." They find these black stains on the wall and have ghostly encounters and references to a place called the Forbidden Room. One of her co-workers, Yabe, goes into one of these forbidden rooms, removes the red tape, and has possibly one of the most frightening encounters with a ghost I've ever seen in my entire life. Meanwhile, you have another character, Ryosuke Kawashima, a university student who has just signed up to use the internet. He sees disturbing images similar to the ones of Taguchi, including a message that asks, "Would you like to meet a ghost?" Ryosuke's not sure what is happening on his internet, and he goes to see some computer science grad students. There he meets Harue, who is interested in the website, and another graduate student who talks about his theory that the dead are invading the world. All of the characters are having these ghostly encounters, with Haruo, who starts to believe that the dead are trying to catch the living in their eternal loneliness. Ryosuke tries to leave with Haruo, but she descends further into despair. Eventually, Ryosuke meets Michi, and both then venture out into the city that is now deserted. All right, so, Brogan, this was your first time watching the film. We got a message from you while you were watching it. So, yeah, how was this experience for you?
Yeah, I mean, I messaged you guys on Friday night saying, quarter of the way through Pulse, if he keeps up this way the rest of the film, I think I'm going to shit my pants. I found that first half an hour especially just terrifying. And I think what made it even more frightening for me was that the film never explicitly says this is why these horrors are happening. There are theories and there are hints, but it stays a little bit mysterious to the end. And I was reading some criticism about the film that mentioned it doesn't make sense, so it's difficult to follow. And I just think it just feels like complaining that a piece of like abstract art doesn't make sense. It's like I was watching it. It's gonna sound a bit pretentious, but it felt like a piece of like cubism in that scene to scene. The film isn't saying explicitly why things are happening, who certain characters are, what their relationships are, what's happening in the world around the characters. But it's like taken all together, the pieces give you this strong picture of the film's themes and its ideas and the overall tone of the film. And yeah, I really loved that about it, and it loved that it's in this space of not giving me all the answers. So because I don't have all the answers, it's more frightening, and it sticks with me because afterwards I'm still pondering what it all meant, what these images meant, and that I find the best kind of horror, really.
I actually struggle to think of a film that really is as unrelentingly like bleak and despairing as what I feel. I think this film is ultimately saying, but it's definitely, it comes out in 2001, and it definitely feels like it's capturing this moment. Obviously, it's the turn of the century, but it's this moment where the internet started to become such an important part of our lives. I think one of the first things we hear is the dial-up, and there's such a sense memory that comes from hearing that dial-up tone. I mean, Brogan, you're like 10 years younger than us. I'm assuming do you have memories of dial-up?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, I remember that term very well.
What do you think the film is saying about this new technology? It's coming out as we all, and it's like what we're feeling now of we're all pretty much being forced to use this technology. Ryosuke, when he's asked why he's signing up to the internet, and there's an amazing, the one kind of light, somewhat comedic scene of him signing up to the internet, going through a manual. He's got this, I think it's like a CD-ROM. And there's the whole bit where, all the terms and conditions, and he's like, oh yeah, of course, just click it. I'm not going to read all this. What is this crap? So yeah, what is the film saying about this new technology?
Yeah, I mean, it's deeply suspicious. It's the internet as a kind of virus infecting people, and slowly the world of the film becomes lonelier. There are fewer and fewer people in the frame until in the end it's just individual main characters in the frame, and other people in the world have disappeared. We don't know where, they're just somewhere, but they're not what we can see in the frame. And it resonates again, like Colossus, it resonates today still, I think, because we know that there are people who can become consumed by the internet. They can, in a way, kind of become infected by conspiracies and hate. It's a kind of mind virus. And that people in the internet age are more so than before staying home as a substitute for going out and socializing. This is something that was just turbocharged during COVID. And this film just kind of presents the extreme of that, which is that if I'm reading the film correctly, It's that the internet ultimately leads everybody to kind of disappear into the ether, just kind of, and society. Yeah, it's just like empty streets.
Yeah, I think at a time when the internet's being sold as this thing of like it's going to connect everybody together, we're all going to be more connected than ever before, and the film I think is like very forward looking to say that no, it's going to make us more isolated and more alone in a lot of ways, and that but in the film the things that people are connecting with are with these ghosts. And I think one of my interpretations of it is it's almost that this digital world that we've created has become this like repository for the spirit, the ghosts where that didn't have anywhere, that couldn't move on into the afterlife, have kind of been dumped into the digital space in some way, and that's they're using that now to try and reach out, and it's almost like, and it's kind of infecting the users who are all young people. And again, it's that kind of, we've seen things now like the show Adolescence and stuff, where it's like about the sort of children and young people being radicalized and being altered by being just terminally online. And I think that's like this is stuff that I don't know if Kurosawa was actually thinking about these things, or it's just become now in 2025, it's become quite prescient, this film. But yeah, I think this is sort of kind of weird supernatural aspect to it, but I think that's sort of what I get out of it.
I guess there's also just the fact that a cyberspace, that we used to call it, is this incorporeal space. That we also, when we think about the spirit world or the afterlife, it is also this intangible space, and that maybe there's there's a blurring or connection that might happen, or bleeding into that, to use a corporeal term. And it also, I think, connects the fact that it was part of the J-horror trend, and within Japanese culture, it was one of the kind of, I guess, first societies that really became quite high tech. In the 80s, Japan becomes this economic force, and I think a lot of it is because of all the technological innovations that were being made there. But also you had, around 1997, you had the Asian financial crisis, where all of that kind of comes to a halt. And you had all these people that were the salaryman, or who was promised basically lifetime employment, possibly losing that employment. And, what is their life now, now that they're not working? And so you had, there was a rise in a lot of loneliness, especially in kind of older generations. But then I guess with younger generations, is they also no longer had that promise of lifetime employment and stability and security. But what they do have is all this internet, and they're just striving for this connection in any way they can. You also in Japan had the rise of what's called hikikomori, which was this almost phenomenon of a lot of, I think it's mostly young men who completely socially isolate themselves. And a lot of it was that they were mostly just kind of living their lives online. And you had, that they wouldn't have any kind of connections or friendships with other people and kind of IRL. So there was all this huge wave of loneliness and isolation. And you mentioned before, like with COVID, and I think just with students I have now, like I can see the effects of making young people sit in a room at that formative age, and the only connection and the only way they were able to communicate with people was through the internet and screens. And I think there's definitely been, some bad effects with that. I mean, there are some positive aspects that have come with these technological kind of innovations and the internet, that some people have used it as a way to form actual connection and form relationships and have communities. Because maybe they don't, like if you're at school and you're bullied, then no one at school likes you, but you might be able to find people online that you... and some people, the identities that they build online might be more authentic to them than who they are outside of that. But this film is not showing that potential at all. It's very much this bleakness. So you have all these young people in the film. They're all very isolated and lonely. So what do you think the film is saying about this loneliness and increased dependence on new technology? Is it saying it's going to make it worse? Or is it just allowing us to see the truth of, was it the eternal loneliness that exists even in death?
I mean, the film definitely seems to be suggesting that the internet will only make things worse. This tool that's, because in the film from the start, you feel this loneliness in the characters already, but you have this tool that's supposed to connect the world, and it's actually isolating them further. So Ryosuke wants to get online, he says, because he doesn't have friends, and he says he wants to do it because other people are doing it, but it doesn't make him any more connected. He meets people through the process of going through this nightmare, but ultimately you can't connect with them. And then ultimately he just fades away at the end of the film. So yeah, it's a very pessimistic view of the internet.
Growing up during the early days of the internet myself, like late 90s, early 2000s, I myself would tend to stay home and go into chat groups like IRC. I don't know if anyone out there remembers IRC. It was like an online chat thing. And I would just meet people and socialize with them through just like typing basically text to one another rather than go and do stuff with the rest of the family. Because I didn't want to go do sporting events, and I didn't want to go, things that I didn't want to go and do. I'd just stay home and go online. And when I think back on it, I was being very isolated because I was, feeling like no one else related to me other than the people in those chat rooms.
But then the danger as well. Like I think about, like I hear about, so I remember being at university and someone taking me through in kind of a computer lab like in the film, and another student teaching me how to sign up for an email address. I can't remember. I don't know if it was Yahoo or something. I don't remember where it was. But I think about so I was kind of late teens, but I think about again, probably Brogan, you must have, thinking about kids and the danger that was there. I mean, it's even possibly worse now, but just that it was like the Wild West, I think, at the beginning in terms of, because I guess you have no idea who you're speaking to, and are you actually speaking to another kid or are you speaking to someone else? So there's always this threat and danger, I think, as well, especially at that time, I think. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I mean, I was, I suppose, lucky in that I wasn't very computer literate. So the extent of me using the internet at a young age was kind of being on MSN Messenger and just connecting with friends on there. It's as you're saying, Lindsay, it's like, and it's something that the film is kind of getting to, is that you're interacting with the screen, but it's a lot of times in the film you're seeing faces that are obscured. You don't know who you're interacting with. They are ghosts within this machine, and it's not dissimilar to the experience of interacting with people online. You're interacting with the screen. There's no one actually there. It's symbols on a bright box. And the film kind of getting to this idea that you're not interacting with a human being. It's anonymous, really.
And it's funny, I find the character of Haruo really, really interesting, because when Ryosuke comes in and he's wanting to basically find out why are all these disturbing images coming on, because I think not long after he signs up, he's sleeping and the monitor comes on by itself, and he gets the message, "Do you want to meet a ghost?" And Haruo overhears him, and she's almost like, "Oh yeah, can you what's this website? Where can I meet a ghost?" She seems like, "Oh yeah, this is," and it seems very much like she's looking for answers. I mean, I think at one point she talks about when she was younger, she was really kind of obsessed with death and wanting to know what happened after you died. And maybe it is this, that her studying of technology is her trying to find answers she wants to know. And unfortunately, she does end up finding out, which is that it is just death is eternal loneliness. People might think, oh, well, if I feel lonely or isolated in this life, maybe in the afterlife things will be better and sit on a cloud and all things will be lovely. And And it's just like, no, it's just more the same. It's it's lonely. And it's this realization that I guess that death isn't any better. But yet at the same time, when people find that out, they still end up, like in some of them, they are taking their own lives. There is this rise in kind of suicide. But it's almost like, well, why would you want to kill yourself if you know that you're not going to get any relief or release afterwards? It's just interesting that Rue, she is intrigued by what's going on. And also there's the thing in the computer lab where, is it the weird thing with the screen with the dots? And it's how, what is it? If they get too close to each other, they die.
Yeah.
And then I think she says, yeah, it's just like people, right? You know, if you get too close to someone, then... So she has this she seems to have this very kind of pessimistic outlook. And I don't know if it's almost like her work is just confirming what she's already believes, or I don't know what you made of her character or these computer science students and their strange dots on the screen and what was going on there.
Well, I think it's kind of typical of this kind of film where you have humans looking for a solution to sometimes fundamental problems in technology, and then finding over the course of the film that the solution isn't there. It actually makes things worse. It's in Colossus, it's in Pulse. The characters in the film seeking connection, seeking answers through this new technology and finding it just isn't there. The solution to what they're feeling is to actually connect with other human beings. But they go down these rabbit holes of, these internet rabbit holes, and down there isn't the answer. And through the course of the film, the film it's a bleak ending, but the main character kind of recognizes, I'm there at the end with my last friend. Film kind of recognizing that the answer all along was to be with another human being, not to seek answers in this tech, which will just kind of consume you.
But then, like at the end, he's not really there anymore. He's become the black stain. So that's the thing. It's like, oh God, she hasn't really got. But she says, I've found happiness now with my last friend, and I'm like, but he's not even there anymore. It's just so bleak.
Yeah, I guess it's the friends we made along the way, right? But I think it's that she's found that connection, that time that they spent together was valuable enough that she can now continue on. And I think, yeah, you're right. It's that human connection that makes her a survivor. And maybe it's the whole idea about the ghost coming through the screens. It's kind of like the technology is making people so isolated and alone that it kind of lifts the veil between the living and the dead, so that you become so alone, you're almost like a living ghost, that you can now see these ghosts, or you're pulled along to create these forbidden rooms in order to encounter the ghost, because you've almost crossed over into this other realm, and that's what kind of ends up killing you or making you experience a soul death or something, because you've gone too far. You become so alone that you become a ghost, because I think even Kurosawa said he wanted to explore something about people becoming ghosts without dying. And this whole idea that the internet, the technology has isolated you so much that you may as well you're as lonely as a ghost, so you kind of become one, even though you didn't die in the first place, which is horrifying thought, really.
Because I think there was the character, the other grad student, Yoshikaze, who says, no matter how simple the device, once the system is complete, it will function on its own and become permanent. In other words, the passage is now open. So there's this open portal, I guess.
The portal's been opened to the other realm.
But yet there's also this link between technology and contagion and this idea of going viral, which now, is seen as something positive when you go viral. It's something that you want. You want to go viral. But yet this technology is kind of infecting, spreading, taking us over. So how is the film kind of playing out this long-standing fear of technology being the thing that will destroy us or eradicate us? So, which is a very kind of technophobic stance, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's just that old idea that technology can steal your soul. The way that an old idea that taking a photograph of somebody can capture somebody's soul. And in this film, it's that people online, part of them, because if they spend so much time with it, it is kind of like a part of them is in that world because they're not out interacting in the real tangible world. It is almost like a version of themselves, even a ghost of yourself, if you want, is in that world. But I think like it's for all that like there are ghosts and horrible visions in Pulse. I think the film just gets at what like the more mundane horror, if you want to call it that, of the internet, which is it's ostensibly means of connecting us, but the way we use it, I'm an individual interacting with symbols on a screen, means we're actually more alone than if we were out in the world connecting with other human beings. And what sticks with me, even though there's apocalyptic imagery in the film, like the plane falling out of the sky, what sticks with me is that the world of the film just becomes progressively quieter until there are no people around anymore. And it's this quiet, creeping sort of apocalypse. And again, because the film isn't holding your hand, it isn't like there are news bulletins on the screen, but there isn't like a news bulletin on the screen explaining exactly what's happening. You just get snatches of that. You don't quite understand what's happening in the world. All you see of the world is that people are gradually disappearing, and then they're just gone. And that's I find that particularly frightening.
But it just reminded me a lot of it becomes more like a pandemic film towards the end. And it reminds me of the time when you would walk around the streets and there would be no one there. Everything was deserted. And you were just so much at home and having to rely on technology. And there's also, this threat of something spreading that you've got completely out of control. You don't understand it. You don't know what it is. But there and people are disappearing. People are dying. I was thinking when I watched this film and when I watch other Kyoshi Kurosawa films, there always is this kind of viral element of something being passed on. You see that in Cure, of something kind of ideas being implanted. In Chime, there's this chime that people hear and then one person talks about it and then suddenly someone else hears it. And so there's always this passing on. And always with his films, I even think his more recent film, Cloud, which is very much about technology and very much about, I guess, using technology to make money. It's very much about kind of late stage capitalism, Cloud. But there's always this apocalyptic feeling that I get from all of his films. Even the drama that he did called Tokyo Sonata, which is, not a horror film at all, but it's about this family and you following all the different characters in all the different people in the family, and they're all also very isolated from each other. There's a bit more hopeful in Tokyo Sonata, but it is that like they're basically a family living in the same home, but they're all living very separate lives and they're not really connecting with each other.
With the whole idea of like things going viral, I mean, you can go viral for the wrong reasons too. It's not always a good thing, but it does make me think of I think something that the film prefigures is the idea of like getting a trend online where you get given instructions and everyone's trying to recreate the same thing, like whether it's a dance move or whatnot. And I think that's seen in this film with the Forbidden Room. Like at first in the film, I thought people were finding these forbidden rooms taped up, but then you realize, no, you just find red tape, you tape up a room, and then it seems to capture a ghost inside it. And then when you go inside, you experience the ghost. But then like everybody who does that ends up having like an existential crisis and kind of die inside and become stains on the wall. And it's almost like the ghosts are teaching us how to get in contact with them to kind of, it's almost like we're lonely, you're lonely, let's be lonely together. And they're almost kind of sending the instructions on how to do that. And I think certain people who are so terminally online, they've got to that point where they then are compelled to create these rooms in order to then I guess, cross over or have that experience or what have you, which is also what leads to one of the scariest moments in the film, which we'll talk about later.
But then there is this whole thing, like there is a play on the whole thing of red tape.
Yeah.
And how you just go, oh, yeah. And it's kind of like the whole thing of you just click, yes, I agree, go into it blindly. And it's this whole thing of like, it's taped up the room. What? Don't go in there. Why are you going in there? Why are you taking the tape off?
So in the terms and conditions for signing up, does it say something about then, your soul will be forever damned? Yeah, okay, sure, click, accept.
Yeah. But yeah, the film does bring everything down to a very personal level as well, about this kind of annihilation of the self. Because this film feels very much like, when we talk about existential horror and existential dread, I kind of feel like this is the film. So, I mean, what did you think about the dread and the existential dread that this film creates and what it's saying?
I think the film's really good at like reckoning with what it might mean to live in a world where we're shifting from analog to digital. We're going from living in a real tangible world to a world where we exist both in a real world and in an online world. And the online world will slowly but surely seep into all areas of that real world, and it will change existence as we know it. And that's exactly, the internet has changed the world in that way. Everything is different now. And Kurosawa is taking what was then not exactly a brand new technology, but a technology that was starting to be used more commonly by regular people, and asking what in the extreme could that new technology do to us as a species? How could it change us and our world if left unchecked? And his conclusion is extreme. It's the end of humanity as we know it, but that's just what speculative fiction is supposed to do. It presents as the extreme version of leaving this new technology unchecked.
And I guess also this whole idea of it is about this annihilation of self, and it just made me think that to get very philosophical, like the whole notion of the self involves us disconnecting from everything around us. In order to have a self, we must recognize our separation from the rest of the world around us. But yet also at the same time, we always want to embrace the self and live our truths. But then also at the same time, we want to connect with other people. We're all striving with that connection that we lose once we realize that we're just our own selves. And so, yeah, in terms of like this whole idea of existentialism and this whole question that I always think about, like, if you realize that death is eternal loneliness and all that is waiting for you beyond death is more of the same, then why are these characters falling into despair, or why are they kind of almost seeking death? And it's almost like I don't know if it's just also like just trying to take some kind of control or responsibility over this annihilation. There's just all these very kind of deep philosophical questions that I feel like the film is trying to explore. And yeah, the fact that you don't get any answers, we're all just striving for answers, and the whole thing is like there isn't any. Or the answer is, it's just awful. Yeah, death is eternal loneliness, I think, is a line that always plays in my head.
The human connection thing, I think it's a cautionary tale then about that, we need to then make these human connections, because you think you're lonely now, well, get ready, because when you die, you're going to be lonely forever. Like, you best make the most of it now. Whereas I think a lot of these characters feel it's like, I'm so lonely, I may as well be dead. And then because what's the point of anything? And I think like we were saying about that moment at the end where she finds that human connection, I think that's where the salvation lies, is make those human connections in life now, because otherwise it'll be too late. And then it is like an apocalypse, a personal apocalypse.
It feels like, as much as it's a film about new technology, it also just feels like a film about, and I'm not sure if this is what was intended, but a film about living with depression and living with the one way of viewing life is that ultimately you die anyway. That is one way to view life. Another way of looking at it is it could be about the friends you make along the way, if you want to view it that way. This film reaches that conclusion at the end, but it's predominantly what's on the film's mind is this idea of ultimately we are all alone, and ultimately we will die. And the characters, when they become kind of infected, they seem like terminally depressed people. And I don't know if that's something Kurosawa was going for, but that kind of just the way they behave, like they're not interested in anything anymore. They're kind of just walking zombies. And it felt, yeah, as much as it's a film about the internet and what might the internet do to us as a society. At the beginning of the film, before this infection starts to spread, these people seem pretty, if not depressed, pretty sad, pretty unhappy anyway. So yeah, it feels like it's saying something about dealing with the what do you do living with this idea of what's it all about, like if we're all going to die, if we're all alone. And yeah, at least at the end we get this connection between two characters. At least at the end, there's, even if the connection becomes a stain on the wall, she does find some connection.
I mean, she says, "I've found happiness now," which I'm like, all right, yeah. And it reminds me, like near the beginning of the film, after Taguchi, his body is found, and there's a scene. I think they're at there's a couple of them, Michi and a couple, maybe Junko. They're having a conversation, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that thing that happened with Taguchi is really sad." Yeah, one of them says it's so upsetting, but they say it with absolutely no emotion. And they're like, "Oh yeah, he just suddenly wanted to die." And then one other one goes, "I get that way sometimes. It's so easy to hang yourself." And it's just like, and they're saying it so matter-of-factly, and there isn't that much emotion behind it. So there is this whole thing of like that the living are almost already dead. But the ghosts in this film are very different to usual representations of like the vengeful ghosts or ghosts with unfinished business, especially that you're getting in J-horror at this time. So yeah, what are these ghosts? Do they have a malicious intent, do you think? Or what are they doing? Why are they here?
I mean, I don't know is the answer, and I like not knowing. I like that the director leaves me to dwell on it. I wonder if it's just, I mean, I don't know what their intentions are, if they have any, or if they're just like digital echoes. But I like, it's like the Shining thing. I don't want the Shining explained. I like not knowing what the Shining's about. I like not knowing why, whether they're visions or the hallucinations of this man, or if they are real ghosts. And I like that in this film there's no answer. But I love the design of the ghosts in the film. Like they're these glitching, they're like digital glitches. They're these slightly shapeless things until they come into focus. And it's almost like the experience of like using the early internet when the screen would slowly load and come into focus. It's almost like that.
Yeah, they're very low res, these ghosts. And yeah, there's no jump scares, really. I think it's just the whole thing that they move just so slowly and they just keep coming. And there is this song, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about the one woman, but it's almost like she just wants to be seen, this whole thing of just wanting, like she just they keep coming forward and I'm like, please just see me. Yeah, maybe that's all they want. I don't know.
I think because they're so lonely, because they're existing all around us, right? And they see us all going about their lives, but we don't notice them. And then it's like, but this technology, the way that what it's doing to people is drawing them closer, so then they're actually being able to see them. And they're almost like jealous. They want to bring us in to be as lonely as them or something. I don't know. But I think it's like, yeah, they're finally being seen by people, and I think that's why they compel people to create these forbidden rooms so they can finally be seen. And
there's also this whole thing of like the stain on the wall. I guess in some ways you could say it is an optimistic thing of like, we do leave a mark. There are remnants of us that we leave behind. Although then there is the one, is it Junko, where she becomes a stain on the wall and then it just turns into ash, and then I think it almost like blows out the window. So in her case, there is almost like no trace of her. There's always been this use of technology to try and contact the other side. I mean, like spirit photography and there's all these gadgets, like people who are ghost hunters always have all this technology and gadgets. So it's always been something that with technology what we wanted to use it for is, I guess, the whole thing of it just to find out. And I guess in some ways it is like, be careful what you wish for. Yeah, you'll find out what's on the other side and you won't like the answer. Definitely, I think the aesthetic of early digital images is so central to the creation of dread in the film. And yeah, like I mentioned, the low-res ghosts. And it is this blurriness. And I guess it's also like the blurring of lines and blurring of borders. But what do you make of Kurosawa's use of the early digital imagery, which I think definitely kind of plays into, your distorted frame and what you're doing there and the whole idea of exploring the digital image?
I mean, I think like the aesthetic of early digital is just central to what's scary about. It's central to what's scary about found footage horror. It's central to what's scary about that scene in Signs at the Child's Birthday Party where you're seeing it's a DV camera footage, or the scenes in Pulse where we're seeing people just sat in their apartments at computers. Some images are more frightening than that. There are violent images, but some images it's just people sat in their apartments, and it's frightening because it has this early digital sheen over it, and it's like the gap in image quality between professional digital cameras and professional consumer cameras is shrinking all the time. So now you can get great looking films shot on iPhone, like 28 years later. But early digital is like rough and blurred and pixelated, and it's not what professional images look like. It's not what they're supposed to look like. It's what everyday images captured by regular people. So in our minds, it's the aesthetic of something quote unquote real. So the image has the texture of something real, and it just makes the scary thing, whatever that is, whatever's happening in the frame, it's more authentic seeming, and then it's therefore just more frightening because we're seeing something that we kind of subconsciously were like, well, that's real. That's has the texture of something real. And in Pulse, the digital images have a voyeuristic quality as well. So it's like you're just eavesdropping on someone sat at their computer. But when that person suddenly shoots themselves in the head, it's like you're watching snuff footage. I mean, that's terrifying.
And there's definitely like an uncanniness that it's familiar, but you're like, because it is so low res, and like you said before, it's the screen slowly loading. Or there's one point, was it? Oh, when Mitchie's watching the news report about the man who had sent a message in the bottle and was found 10 years late when he was a kid, and it was found 10 years later. But there's almost this glitching. And so it's like, and so you can kind of make out what it is, but you're not sure. So for me, it's that uncanniness, and which, uncanniness is always, central to horror and dread and fear, that it's familiar, but not quite familiar. Yeah, you can't quite make it out. And then, of course, with digital technology, you had the uncanny valley as well, that we find it does look so real and so clear, but there's something a bit off, and that what makes us feel unsettled because we know it's not quite real, or we're questioning, we're not sure. So definitely I think it's playing with this uncanniness. And I guess the whole thing with uncanniness is also it's to do with what the kind of return of the repressed, and the one thing we all repress is that we're all going to die one day, and this fear of death that we have. It's definitely, I think, using digital in this uncanny way, that it's not always clear and we're not always sure what we're seeing. One of the things I also found in the film was that there's always shots through curtains and glass, and there's always partitions and things. And a lot of wide shots that are really emphasizing the isolation of people, and, you're seeing that no one is around. people, especially when they're by themselves, they look so small and they're kind of just in these vast empty spaces. So I guess one of the things that happens as the film progresses, it seems to suggest that society is collapsing, becomes apocalyptic. And one of the things that I also think of is on the Blu-ray, the Arrow Blu-ray, there's this really great interview with Kurosawa. And he talks about how in Japan, they're kind of used to almost like every 50 years, the city is destroyed, whether it's obviously from the nuclear bomb or, earthquakes. I think was the earthquake that just happened. Did that affect Japan? I don't know.
No, but there was one with Fukushima and all of that.
Yeah. And tsunamis and things. And so people, especially in Japan, they always feel like the city can be destroyed at any time and that they're going to have to rebuild. Again, I think of the resignation that you talked about before. He talked about how he watched Godzilla as a child. One of the first films he ever saw was a monster movie, and that he was always seeing cities being destroyed in films, especially Japanese cities, that it always is this feeling that the city is in danger, that it could happen in your lifetime. Do you think that in this film, the apocalypse is direct result of this technology?
Yeah, I mean, just to speak on that, that historical collective trauma of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is referenced in Godzilla, is about that. It makes its way into this film as well, even it's 56 sorry. And the way that people disappear is they become these like black stains on the wall. You see that in images from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where you kind of had these people's shadows burned into pavements or buildings or whatever. And then also those people then turn into ash. And it's like you still have this imagery in the collective consciousness of you have this lingering horror regarding that particular trauma. I think the film, it definitely seems to suggest that technology is bringing about humanity's decline, or at least accelerating humanity's decline. And I think even before the technology, whatever kind of virus it's spreading, if it is spreading a virus, before that begins to spread, infect more and more people, kind of invasion of the body snatchers style, the people in this world already seem doomed to loneliness, and the technology just pushes them over the edge from a kind of numbness, just kind of numb existence, into them being catatonic, and then finally they're suicidal.
Well, I think, the idea of the stains on the wall being reminiscent of Hiroshima makes me think of what's interesting is that this is a film from the point of view of a country of people who've had the threat of nuclear war is very potent because it's happened. It's been like perpetrated on them. And whereas with a film like Colossus, the fear is from the perpetrator, is a film by the perpetrators of that. And the fear there is not that it's going to happen again, but that it's going to happen to them. Like the bombs are going to be dropped on them, rather than them doing the dropping. And it's that idea of the power we give technology of like it turning its gaze on us, and whether that's going to be like we're going to have what we've like in the terms of Colossus, like we're going to become the victims, whereas we were the perpetrators before. And with the with Japanese film of being this is going to happen to us again, and there's nothing we can do about it.
I was wondering, have you seen many of the J horror films of this period? This film kind of sits within the late 90s, early 2000s trend of what's called J horror, which very much starts with The Ring, but it all seems very much about technology. Do you find that this film is typical of those films, or is it different, or are you a fan of these films from this time?
So I'm so unfamiliar with J horror that all I've really seen is this and The Ring. But seeing this really wanted me to go and seek out for one more Kurosawa, partly because I understand he's worked in a range of different genres, not just J horror, because I always kind of assumed, because what I read was that he was a horror director exclusively, but apparently not so. But yeah, I'd defer to you on this, Lindsay, because I think you're the expert in this area.
Again, in this interview that's on the Blu-ray, Kurosawa says that this film was totally a copy of The Ring, but also it was a film where a bunch of different ideas that he'd had, he just kind of bundled them all together. And he, I guess, inspired by The Ring and kind of wanted to go on that bandwagon in some ways. But then he also said that he didn't think it was going to last. But then a year after this, the Grudge comes out, and then it becomes very, very popular again. He also says he consciously was trying to go away from some of the images. So there isn't the ghost with the long hair in long robes. So it has the technological aspect of it. But then I think the ghosts in this film that they aren't vengeful. That's a big thing. And also I think it maybe plays to, I guess there is cultural differences within Japan and their relationship to the spirits and the dead. They still are a presence in people's lives, is something that you're getting in these films. I think the film also does stand out from a lot of the other J-horror films. You get other J-horror films like Takashi Miike's One Missed Call, which is just like a kind of silly horror film where people get a phone call on their mobile phones kind of saying you're going to die. And it kind of goes around like a virus, but it's all very kind of much more fun and entertaining. This film is just so unrelentingly bleak that I think it's tonally, I think, quite different to a lot of the others. But which scene in this film is the scariest? I think we're probably all thinking of the same scene, but I think so.
Yeah, the scene with Yabe where the ghost appears and then just marches. It's the marching. Marching slowly towards him and then starts kind of gyrating in front of him. When I was watching it, my partner was in the other room and could hear me just shouting at the screen. I had to pause the film and go tell her what was happening because I just couldn't believe it. I was like, I don't know what's going on. This is horrible. I don't tend to like jump scares that much. It feels a bit like horror cinema's fast food where you get a fright for that second and it's a bit of instant gratification and then it's over. And it tend not to linger with you, but the horror impulse is the kind of horror that just remains with you because it's ideas as well as the images. It's the idea because it's the not knowing. It's being in that space and not knowing why this is happening. A lot of the images, it's just a static shot with minimal cutting, and it's just that what's happening in the frame it's just inexplicable and it's uncanny. You don't quite understand what's happening, and the film isn't going to explain it for you. So it sticks in my mind as just this unsolvable, unknowable thing that'll keep churning over.
And it's the weird stumble that she does.
Yeah.
You think, oh, she's going to fall over. No, she's righted herself. She's going to keep coming. I think it is just the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he hides behind the couch, right? And then she's comes
yeah, and you just couch. Like... Yeah, it's the whole thing of like when you're a kid, you're like, if I just hide, and it's like, no, it's still there.
Yeah. That's definitely the scariest scene for me. But the bit that I keep thinking about as well is because is it Ryosuke, who's like the Luddite who doesn't really understand the internet, and he says throughout the film that he's like he just doesn't believe, he just refuses to believe in ghosts, and he's like, that's how I'm going to deal with it. I'm just going to not acknowledge it. And then he's in that room at the end with the white-faced ghost who's and he's like just shutting his eyes, saying, I'm not going to engage. And then eventually he's forced to like open his eyes. Then he's like, well, don't worry, I'm going to touch you and you're not going to be there. And then he grabs and he's actually able to grab hold of it. And he just like freaks the fuck out because it's like, imagine that, like you're like, oh, it's just a ghost, I'll go right through it. And then it's solid. Like that's pure nightmare fuel, I think, for me. Of that, it's that it is actually this tangible thing, that it's a ghost, but you can actually touch it. And I keep thinking about that, and it's like gives me the heebie-jeebies.
And yeah, so the thing is, you have ghosts on screen, and then ghosts in real life. So the ones that have really scared us have been the encounters in real life. But then there's something also when you see them on the screen that's always in shadow. I know we've talked before about the digital low res. But yeah, I just remember they're always in shadow, and it's always like you're not quite sure just what they're doing or are you seeing other faces? Because I think at the very beginning, the one with Taguchi, is this video of, I think you think it's him. It's like it's not even sure if it's him sitting down. But then I think there's another face. It is that whole thing of like when you have really blurry, like the low-res photos, you almost start to see other things. And I'm like, is it just really there, or is it just the weird shading of the shadows or something? And so it makes you also conjure up more in your mind as well. And also that whole thing of like, I guess what I see won't be exactly what you see as well. That's kind of freaky when we think about it. We all might be being scared by completely different things or seeing completely different things in those images, which is kind of quite frightening, I think.
So I guess that leads to the next question. Would you like to meet a ghost?
When I was a kid, I thought I did meet a ghost. So like, I don't think I did though. I remember when like I was in my mum and dad's house when I was about 3, and I woke up and I felt like something pulling on my leg, and I remember kicking at it, and it flew out down the hallway and out the bathroom window. And then I went into my mum and dad's room and woke them up and told them like a dark shape had been in my room. I think they were just letting me go to bed. And then I raised this with my mum years later, and she's just like, you were on a lot of strong medication at the time. But apparently I was just hallucinating on asthma medication. But I would like to meet a ghost. It would be an interesting experience.
Well, you talk about The Shining, like Kubrick always said that it's actually, you know, ghosts are a good thing because it means there's an afterlife and that the soul lives on after death. So he's like, it's actually a happy story.
I don't even know if The Shining is saying that. Because the Shining is like, and if there is an afterlife, it doesn't seem like a pleasant one. It's just Jack Nicholson trapped in this ballroom, in this eternal ballroom. There's a pig man, there's like a man who's been stitched back together. It's not pleasant.
I mean, it does also make me think of like when people talk about who've had sleep paralysis, there's that whole thing of they can't move and they see something, which could be a ghost. Maybe sleep paralysis is seeing ghosts. I don't know.
Other world.
Would you like to meet a ghost?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, I have a story of seeing, being outside a friend's house when I was really young and looking across the road and seeing a house, and it was probably in reality just someone walking by their window, but I remember just seeing this image of a person and it looked like a ghost at the time of like a figure moving past by a window in the house across the street. And I still think I have this image of it in my mind and being really freaked out at the time. But it was probably just like some person at home just going to the toilet or something. I don't know. But the way it was presented to me, it looked like a ghost. That's for sure.
I don't have any. I've never had. The only thing that can kind of stick in my mind was when we were in America. We were doing this road trip and you wanted to see, we were in Waco, Texas, and you wanted to see where the whole Waco Branch Davidians thing had happened. Because you said that you'd heard that there was some kind of monument there.
There was an unofficial memorial somewhere there, and we couldn't find it, and we were driving around.
And I remember we were both silent, and I remember it made me, I did have that feeling of dread and just felt really bad. And maybe it's just because I knew what had happened there, or is that whole thing of like places where something catastrophic or terrible, traumatic had happened. It's almost like, is there an energy there that you're feeling, or is it just because I knew and I felt a bit weird about us going to see it. But yeah, that's the only time where I felt like this feels bad and wrong. Yeah, but I didn't see any ghosts. Yeah. So I guess we'd all like to meet a ghost.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know, but then if it came up, if it just randomly if a message popped up on the screen right now and it said, would you like to meet a ghost? Should we click on it or not?
No.
Okay. We're not clicking on it. Shall we move on to honourable mentions? So we're all just going to quickly give another recommendation of other films or TV shows that are kind of have this same kind of some of the themes that we've been looking at today. So we'll kick off with you, Liam, because I have a feeling
Well, yeah, I do try to do an X-Files episode for an honourable mention, and I don't think I've done one in a while. But I've been saving for this one when we did this subject. But there's a season 5 episode called Kill Switch, which is co-written by William Gibson, the author of Neuromancer. And he did 2 episodes for the show. The first one, which the Kill Switch, is the better one. But that is all about an AI that's invented by a tech genius who actually, what he does is he sort of grows the AI and then lets it loose on the internet, as if they say it's kind of a digital primordial ooze, which is let loose on the internet and grows and becomes sentient. And its creator realizes, what have I done? I've let this thing loose. He tries to destroy it. And what's interesting is that's the cold open is that he's working away in a cafe, and then all these people are getting phone calls of that they need to go to this exact cafe, and they're all law enforcement and criminals. And basically the AI has called them all there to set up a big gunfight. So the creator is caught in the crossfire and killed. And so then Mulder and Scully get hold of the laptop and the kill switch, which he wanted to use to destroy the AI. And start to investigate, and they find the woman who was working with him, whose online tag name is Invisigoth, and with her help, they try to find out how to destroy this AI, and in like Colossus, it has that great thing of that this AI is kind of just this thing that exists out in the world, and the only evidence you get of it is through its actions. So it keeps trying to track them down, and it uses an orbiting weapons platform to shoot heat beams down on them at every given opportunity, until eventually, and there's even a moment where Mulder finds out because the AI has set itself up in this caravan that's been fed by a broadband or whatever the 90s equivalent of that is, and Mulder finds it and gets captured by the AI, and the AI then creates an alternate reality, virtual reality for Mulder to try and find out where the kill switch is and all these sorts of things. So there's lots of fun little AI, and there's a bit where Scully gets to kung fu fight a bunch of CGI nurses. It goes a bit crazy, but yeah, it's good fun.
All right, Brogan, do you have an honourable mention?
Yeah, I mean, I think because the AI films that we've explored here are quite bleak, I'd give a shout out to the Westworld film, just because it's kind of pure entertainment, and it's Jurassic Park, but instead it's a theme park where robots end up running amok, and it's Michael Crichton, who's the novelist, but also a novelist who's surprisingly capable filmmaker, and it's hard to think of many of those who start in the world of literature and then moved into filmmaking. And this was a very entertaining film, and I'm a big fan of Yul Brynner, and it's maybe I'd say it's maybe his signature performance. So yeah, I'm going to say that to kind of as the palate cleanser for these two incredibly bleak existential films.
Oh yeah, a film I wanted to mention, I think it is over 10 years old now. There was a film made by Nacho Vigalondo called Open Windows, starring Elijah Wood. And I wrote an article about it a few years ago. That's in, I'm just going to get it.
Ooh,
I'm just going to plug. It's in a book called New Blood, Critical Approaches to Contemporary Horror. And I wanted to look at the strange spate of films. It kind of came and went quite quickly around 2014, 2015, 2016 of what I call desktop horror films, where or they're also kind of referred to as screen life films or screen movies. There were around the time of the found footage trend, or I guess maybe towards the end of it. And it was taking the idea of found footage, but the whole thing is that the film takes place basically online, and that the film screen, the computer screen becomes the film screen. So the most obvious example of this is Unfriended. I think that was probably the most popular example, where you're just seeing that there is the online space becomes the location for the film. So something like Pulse, where you have all these images from the internet, but the main film you're seeing is kind of in real life. But yeah, we're watching things kind of through the screen that the characters are also watching or kind of living through as well. So in Open Windows, it's about Elijah Wood, who's this kind of creepy loner guy who runs this website devoted to Jill Goddard, who's this movie star played by Sasha Grey. And he puts up like pictures and things, news about her. It's a fan site. He's a really huge fan. And he basically gets this message or this call on his phone from this unseen person, this voice. So you only ever see the villain of the film. You only ever hear him. You don't ever really meet him, I don't think. And he basically, this voice is saying, I can get you access to Jill Goddard's phone. So the film itself is this idea of lots of different tabs and windows open on a screen, and it tracks and pans around the screen to different, I guess, tabs or windows that are open. So you're seeing different screens within screens. And so it seems like it's almost what you could it's kind of like Hitchcock's Rope, in that it's going from one shot to the other, but making it seem like there's no edit there, but you're just, I always say it's like following the cursor on as it's going from one screen to the next. And that's kind of how the film's story is being told. So it starts off that he gets access to her phone. So he's seeing through her phone. She's at a press conference. And then as it goes along, he's getting access to all these cameras and able to see into her room. So it's also very much about kind of the stalker fan. It's playing into, I guess almost like a lot of people's feelings about, like, they really love a celebrity that they almost feel entitled to have being a part of their lives or seeing every part of their lives. And this off-screen voice is almost also giving, I guess, almost like morality, making him question morality, like how much do you really want to see of her, that he's actually getting to see into her house and like her going into the shower and things like that. And it goes from there, and it almost becomes a bit kind of like a slasher stalker film as it goes along. It gets a bit silly towards the end, but I really, really quite enjoyed it. And so Open Windows, check it out.
Oh, and that brings us to the end of another episode of Sci-Frights. Thank you, Brogan, for joining us. It's been a very interesting conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Anything you've got coming up that you want to let people know about? I mean, there's Distorted Frame, obviously. They can check us out.
And
online.
Where can people find your work or find you online?
Yeah, I mean, I'm currently in between articles, but I'll have something coming up on Paul Thomas Anderson, timed with like a career overview of Paul Thomas Anderson, timed with his new film One Battle After Another, coming out in September. So that'll be on the BFI. And then in terms of Distorted Frame screenings, the next one will be Halloween, and that's a surprise as yet. And Distorted Frame is on we're on Instagram and Facebook and Bluesky.
And you can also find us on Instagram and Facebook and Bluesky. And please let people know that we exist. Leave us a review, rate us wherever you can on any platforms. So help us spread the word about the podcast. Anything else we need to say?
That's it.
All right.
Join us next time.
All right. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.